She ended it over coffee. Not with tears, not with guilt, just a clean, practiced tone that sounded like she'd rehearsed every word. "You're a good man, Nolan," she said, "but you lack ambition. I can't build a future with someone who's comfortable being average." Then she smiled, that polite kind of smile people give when they've already made up their mind, stood up, and walked out. My name's Nolan Price, 34 years old, and until that morning, I thought I was building something real. I wasn't rich. I wasn't flashy. But I had a plan, a slow one, a quiet one. While everyone else chased shortcuts, I was laying groundwork. I was developing a logistics software company from my garage, one client at a time, one contract at a time. To her, that looked like failure. Vivian Hale. Ambitious, beautiful, ruthless in her pursuit of the next big thing. She wanted fast results, instant proof of success. Cars, vacations, public admiration. What I offered was patience, risk, and uncertainty. And she couldn't handle that. I didn't argue with her. I didn't explain. I just nodded, paid the bill, and let her walk away. The waitress came over, noticed the empty chair, and said, "Rough morning?" I said no, just the start of something new. That night, I went back to the office, a converted warehouse with flickering lights and the faint smell of concrete dust. My only company was an aging laptop, 2 whiteboards covered in code and projections, and a list of investors who'd stopped returning my calls. The kind of place that made most people give up. But here's what Vivian never understood. Silence isn't stagnation. It's the sound of building. Over the next few weeks, I stopped checking social media, stopped wondering if she'd regret it. I buried myself in work. I fixed bugs, refined pitch decks, reached out to clients who'd gone cold. Every rejection became fuel. Every sleepless night was an investment. 6 months later, I stood in a boardroom overlooking downtown Chicago, a pen in my hand, and a contract worth $25 million in front of me. The same project she once said would never even get off the ground. I signed it calmly, no celebration, no thrill, just quiet satisfaction. Because I knew sooner or later, Vivian would hear about it. And when she came back, and she would, she'd find a man very different from the one she left behind. After signing the deal, I didn't go out to celebrate. I went home, opened a bottle of cheap bourbon that had been sitting on my counter for a year, and watched the city lights flicker outside my window. The contract I'd signed with Titan Logistics meant everything would change: funding, exposure, validation. But I didn't feel triumph. I felt focus. This wasn't the finish line. It was just the start of a much bigger play. The next morning, I drove to our warehouse, the same concrete box where Vivian once said, "You can't live off dreams, Nolan." My small team was already there. For people who believed in me when no one else did. I told them the news. The deal was closed, funding was approved, and we were scaling immediately. They cheered. I didn't. I just smiled, shook their hands, and went back to work. That week was chaos. Lawyers, investors, compliance calls. My phone didn't stop ringing. Titan's acquisition meant our little startup would be absorbed into a national network. I'd stay on as head of operations, but in reality, I was running the show now. I'd gone from renting equipment to negotiating corporate equity in 6 months. Then it happened, the first message. It came late at night. Her name lit up my phone like a ghost. "Hey stranger, just saw the news. Congratulations. You did it." I stared at the screen for a long time before setting the phone down without replying. Over the next few weeks, more messages followed. Little ones at first, a like on a post, a comment about an old memory, a just checking in. I never responded. I didn't block her either. Silence has its own kind of power. It makes people reveal themselves. By the time she sent the 5th message, "Can we meet?" Just to talk, I'd already made up my mind. When Vivian walked out of that cafe months ago, she thought she was walking away from a man without ambition. She never realized she was walking straight into her own lesson. Now she wanted to come back, but she had no idea what awaited her. Because I wasn't the man she left behind. I'd become the man she didn't think could exist, the one who could win quietly and destroy gently. She reached out again a week later, this time more direct. She said she'd seen my interview in Forbes and wanted to catch up. The message ended with, "I'm proud of you, Nolan. I always knew you'd do something great." That last line made me laugh. It was the kind of lie people tell when they want back into a story they abandoned. I didn't reply for 3 days. Then I sent one sentence. Dinner at 7, Friday. The Birchwood. A neutral tone. No emotion. Just an invitation she wouldn't refuse. When Friday came, I arrived early. The Birchwood was the same upscale restaurant where she once told me, "You need to think bigger, Nolan." Back then, I couldn't afford to argue. Now, the staff greeted me by name. My company handled their logistics contracts. She didn't know that yet. Vivian walked in right on time. Same sharp posture, same polished confidence. But something had changed, a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. She congratulated me again, said I looked different, calmer. I told her success has that effect. She spent most of the meal talking about her new job in marketing, how things haven't been the same, how she'd been thinking about us. I let her speak. I barely said a word. Silence is a mirror. If you hold it long enough, people start to see themselves clearly. By dessert, she leaned in and said softly that she regretted leaving, that she'd been scared, that maybe she'd given up too soon. I nodded, just like I did the day she walked away. Same gesture, different meaning. When the check came, I placed my black card on the tray. She noticed the logo, recognized it from the Titan deal articles, and froze. That was the first moment she realized the scale of what I'd built. The company she dismissed as a garage project had grown into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. As we stood outside, she said she'd love to see my office sometime, to catch up properly. I told her I'd think about it. When she left, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt precision. The plan was moving exactly as I wanted. Because Vivian thought she was walking back into my life. She didn't realize she was walking into a lesson, one she wouldn't forget. The next week, she texted again. This time she thanked me for dinner and said she couldn't stop thinking about how much I'd changed. She said I seemed different, more certain, more alive. I read the message twice before replying with 2 words, "People grow." That was all. Over the next few days, she kept reaching out. Little things at first. Articles she thought I'd like, songs we used to play on long drives, photos of places we once talked about visiting. I didn't answer every message. I didn't have to. The less I said, the more curious she became. That's how silence works. It fills the spaces people can't handle. By the time I finally agreed to meet again, she was already leaning back toward me. I could see it in the way she dressed for our second dinner, carefully, deliberately, like someone auditioning for a role they used to play. She told me she'd broken up with her boyfriend a few months earlier. Said she realized she'd been chasing the wrong kind of success. I didn't correct her. I just listened, nodded, and let her believe she was the one rewriting the story. After dinner, she asked to see my new office. I took her there. The space was clean, minimal, designed for focus. She walked around slowly, running her fingers along the glass conference table, the awards on the shelf, the framed Titan contract hanging near the door. She said it must feel amazing to have proved everyone wrong. I said it wasn't about proving anything. It was about building something that lasted. When she asked if I was seeing anyone, I said no. She smiled, soft, careful. Then she said she'd love to start over. I told her we'd see. She thought that meant maybe. What I actually meant was, I'd already decided exactly how this would end. Because when someone leaves you for being small, you don't win by becoming loud. You win by becoming untouchable. And Vivian was about to learn that the man she once underestimated had stopped living for her approval long ago. I wasn't rebuilding the relationship. I was rebuilding the stage where she'd finally see what her choice had cost her. Over the next few weeks, Vivian started appearing everywhere again. Text messages, late-night calls, casual, accidental visits near my office. I let her in, but only in fragments. A lunch here, a coffee there, short conversations that always ended on my terms. She was chasing the past while I was designing something far more precise. I began inviting her to industry events, quietly at first. She'd walk into the room on my arm, surrounded by investors, executives, journalists. She'd smile proudly, like she was part of the empire she once dismissed. I didn't correct her. I let her play the role. But behind that smile, I saw the flicker of realization every time someone introduced me as the founder of Price Systems. She was seeing the gap between the man she left and the man standing beside her. At one of those events, she mentioned she'd been struggling financially. Her old job had downsized, and she was freelancing now. She said she wished she could work with someone who actually knew what he was doing. I stayed quiet. watching her circle the question she didn't have the pride to ask. Finally, she said it. She wanted to join my company. I told her I'd think about it. The next week, I had HR schedule a formal interview. She came in dressed like she was auditioning for redemption. She spoke about strategy, marketing, potential value she could bring. I listened without expression. When it was over, I thanked her for her time and said I'd get back to her. She left hopeful. Later that afternoon, I walked into the HR office and signed the paperwork. She was hired, but not where she expected. Not in management, not in branding, not in any position of control. I placed her in a temporary junior role under my operations manager. No privileges, no decision-making power, just observation. When she got the offer email, she accepted within an hour. Pride had been replaced by survival. From that day on, she saw me every morning, but never as an equal. She watched me lead meetings, close contracts, negotiate partnerships with the same calm precision she once called laziness. And for the first time, she understood what real ambition looked like. The kind that doesn't need to shout. The kind that simply builds and never looks back. The first week she started, Vivian tried to pretend everything was normal. She greeted me each morning with that polished tone she used to use when she wanted something. But her voice always wavered just enough to give her away. I kept my distance. She wasn't working for me. She was working under my structure. Every task she touched had to be approved by someone who once answered to me. And I made sure that someone didn't bend the rules. I watched quietly as she learned what it meant to be at the bottom again. She sat in open workspaces, surrounded by people who barely recognized her name. No one cared that she'd once mocked my dreams. No one knew our history. To them, she was just another new hire trying to find footing. At meetings, she'd glance toward me, waiting for acknowledgement that never came. I gave her none, not out of cruelty, but because silence teaches faster than words ever could. One afternoon, she stopped by my office, hesitating at the door. She said she was grateful for the opportunity, that she didn't expect to start small. She said she wanted to earn her place. I told her, without looking up from my laptop, that every position in my company is earned the same way, through results. She nodded quietly and left. Over the next month, she worked harder than I'd ever seen her work. Long hours, meticulous reports, showing up early, staying late. The same woman who once accused me of lacking ambition was now chasing validation in a place built from the ambition she doubted. Still, I didn't make it easy. When promotions came up, I overlooked her. Not to punish, but to observe. I wanted to see how much of her motivation came from pride, and how much came from growth. One evening, as the office emptied, I saw her sitting alone, staring at the faint reflection of city lights against the glass. She looked tired, humbled, human. That was when I realized the revenge wasn't in her humiliation. It was in her understanding. Because for the first time, Vivian saw the difference between ambition for attention and ambition for purpose. And she finally knew which one I'd chosen all along. By the third month, the walls had started to close in on her. I didn't need to intervene. The system I'd built handled everything for me. Deadlines, accountability, hierarchy, all of it ran like clockwork. And in that machinery, Vivian was just another moving part. No special treatment. No shortcuts. I'd watch from a distance during team briefings. She'd take notes, nod carefully, speak only when spoken to. The same woman who once lectured me about thinking bigger now struggled to meet quotas set by analysts half her age. Her pride was eroding in small, deliberate fragments, not by force, but by truth. Then came the quarterly review. Every employee was evaluated by department heads, not by me. The results were objective, measurable. When her report landed on my desk, it was solid, efficient, but not exceptional. Competent, but safe. The kind of work that keeps a job but never builds a legacy. The kind she used to accuse me of settling for. I called her into my office to discuss it. She sat across from me, calm but tense. I told her the numbers were fine, but fine doesn't build empires. I said the difference between talent and success was discipline, and that she was still chasing validation instead of value. She didn't argue. She just nodded quietly. That night, after everyone left, I found her alone again. Lights dimmed, laptop open, her face lit by the screen. She wasn't working for recognition anymore. She was just working. For the first time, I saw a hint of who she might have been if she'd stayed when things were hard. The next morning, she sent me a message thanking me for the opportunity and apologizing for how things ended. She said she finally understood what I'd been building all along. I didn't reply. Some messages don't need answers. Instead, I archived it, poured myself a coffee, and went back to work. Because what she called an ending had never been about her at all. It was about me, about learning that success isn't the loud satisfaction of proving someone wrong. It's the quiet certainty of knowing you never needed to. And while she was finding humility, I was finding peace, the kind that doesn't seek applause. Winter came fast that year. Business was growing faster than I could keep up, but the noise of expansion never reached me the way it used to. I'd built the life I wanted, quiet, deliberate, unshakable. Yet every day when I passed Vivian's desk, I saw a reminder of who I used to be. She worked differently now. There was no trace of the woman who used to measure worth in status or attention. She'd stopped dressing to impress, stopped speaking like she was auditioning for approval. She just showed up, focused, and did her job. Efficient, present, tired, maybe, but real. Sometimes I'd catch her glancing at me across the room, as if trying to find the right words, but never quite managing to say them. She didn't need to. The silence between us said everything. One evening, after a long board meeting, she waited outside my office. She said she was leaving the company, said she needed to start over somewhere new. I asked if she'd found another job. She said not yet, but this time, she wasn't running towards something. She was walking away from who she'd been. I nodded once, told her she'd do fine. She smiled, a quiet, tired smile, then handed me her resignation letter. I didn't stop her. I didn't offer a counter. Some closures don't need negotiation. When she left the next morning, she paused at the door and said she was sorry, not for leaving years ago, but for never understanding what ambition really looked like. I didn't answer. She didn't expect me to. After she was gone, I walked through the office, the hum of computers filling the space she used to occupy. For the first time, it felt lighter. That night, I stood by the window of my apartment, city lights reflecting off the glass, and thought about how far I'd come from that small cafe where she said I'd never make it. She wasn't wrong about everything. I hadn't had the kind of ambition she wanted. I'd had something rarer, patience. And patience, when sharpened long enough, becomes its own kind of power. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, and I'd built my entire life around it. Months passed after she left the company. The chaos of expansion consumed most of my days. New contracts, new hires, new cities. I barely had time to think about anything else. But sometimes, when the office was quiet and the last light from the skyline faded against the glass, I'd remember that final look she gave me. It wasn't regret. It was understanding. And that, in a way, was worth more than any apology. One evening, I received an email from her. No greeting, no build-up, just a few lines. She said she'd started a small consulting firm, helping independent startups find investors. Said she was doing it differently this time, slower, smarter, with patience. She thanked me for the lesson I never realized I was being taught. I read it twice, then archived it without replying. Not out of coldness, but because her message wasn't meant to be answered. It was a closing note to a story that had already ended. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at an entrepreneurship conference downtown. It was a big event, cameras, press, investors. As I stepped onto the stage, I spotted her in the crowd. She wasn't hiding. She was sitting near the back, notebook in hand, listening. When our eyes met for the briefest moment, she nodded once. A silent acknowledgement, not of what I'd built, but of what I'd become. I delivered the speech the same way I'd built everything in my life, quietly, directly, without performance. I talked about the value of persistence, the cost of silence, and how sometimes the greatest revenge isn't proving someone wrong. It's proving yourself right, privately. Afterward, I didn't look for her. I didn't need to. That chapter was finished. When I got home that night, the contract for a new international expansion sat on my desk. Another deal, another step forward. I poured myself a drink, stared at the city below, and thought about the irony of it all. Vivian had left me because she couldn't see the man I was becoming. And in leaving, she forced me to become him faster. Sometimes the people who doubt you aren't obstacles. They're catalysts. And she'd been mine. It's been 3 years since that morning she walked away from me in that cafe. 3 years since the word ambition was used like a weapon. And yet, Looking back now, I realize she wasn't wrong. Not completely. I did lack ambition then. At least, the kind she could recognize. Mine was quiet, invisible, the kind that doesn't perform but endures. The company has grown beyond anything I could have predicted. We have offices in 4 countries, hundreds of employees, and contracts that used to be out of reach even for industry giants. My name shows up in magazines, podcasts, keynote invitations, but none of it really matters. The only thing that matters is that I built it on my own terms. Last month, I got another email from Vivian. It wasn't long. She said she'd sold her consulting firm for a modest profit. She was moving to another state to start over completely. No apologies, no nostalgia, just honesty. She said she hoped I was well and thanked me again. This time, I replied with one sentence. I am. That night, I stood in the same spot I always end up, the window of my apartment overlooking the city. The skyline flickered with light, the sound of distant traffic blending with the hum of everything I'd built. I thought about how strange it is that silence can carry so much weight. The truth is, I never needed to win her back. I never even needed her to see what she'd lost. What I needed was to see myself clearly, to understand that ambition doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits, sometimes it watches, and sometimes it burns slow enough to last a lifetime. She once told me I'd never amount to anything. I used to hear those words as an insult. Now I hear them as origin, the spark that started everything. Because when people doubt you, they hand you a gift. They give you something to outgrow. And the quietest kind of revenge is not to prove them wrong. It's to live a life so complete, their memory no longer fits inside it. That's where I am now. Not angry, not proud, just still. And in that stillness, there's everything I ever needed. Been through it. When they crossed a line, and you made sure they felt it.